Hey, what's going on, guys? Nl500 here for Raise Your Edge, and I'm back again with Fallout 86. And we have a hand lined up here that I recently played at a 3-5 no limit game. So jump right into the action here. Loose random player raises to 20. It's standard size in these games. Loose random guy calls. It's on me now. I didn't really know too much about either of these players. I didn't really play with them, but the guy who raised was just, he was playing a decent amount of hands. I could tell he had at least somewhat aggression, kind of knew what he was doing. The guy who called behind, same kind of thing, right? Like limited reads on these guys, but I could definitely tell they're playing, like the ranges are going to be too wide for sure. That's my main read. And they're probably going to be playing, fairly, I would say like ABC, like not doing anything too crazy out of the ordinary. So that's kind of my initial read. Um,
hmm
so what do you think, like right away here with the 10-9 suit? I think we have a couple options here. Obviously not folding, never folding this, but
Yeah, definitely never folding. I mean, I love 10 unsuited. I'm definitely looking forward to play this hand. In general, against more ABC racks, I would mostly 3-bet, yeah, squeeze this hand because it plays quite nicely in a squeeze pot. And it connects with a lot of board textures. But given that we play against two loose random opponents, there's basically no fold equity in live cash. And it's definitely not a value squeeze because yeah, we have 10-9. So we don't need to balance our squeeze range too much. So I would just opt for a call here nearly always with 10-9 against two loose random opponents that are not folding preflop to a squeeze basically ever.
yeah, I think that's good. Yeah, I think squeezing's like I think squeezing it still is fine. Like it's not going to be a mistake. I don't think really, but as you say, like when they don't fold enough, probably just start like three betting with like I don't know queen jack suited or king queen suited stuff
Yeah,
like
just
that. Just a little bit more high
somewhat
card.
exactly better high cards, a little bit more value heavy than usual. Just probably mix in more calls with hands like 7-8, 6-7 suited and stuff. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, for sure. So I call and flop the gutter backdoor spade draw. He comes out betting for like a little under half pot. So I think here definitely don't want to fold. If he bet somewhere like near pot, I would fold. But I think this half pot bet when I have the gutter with the additional backdoor flush draw, I'm just not going to fold this, especially because a lot of times if you do hit your hand, you can get paid off really big because people just they can tend to like overvalue hands or at least not get away from hands, right? They like bet and then they have a tough time folding when you raise. So I think it's pretty standard here to either call or raise. What would you prefer?
Yeah, also don't mind a raise with our hand. We can still have some value hands, right? Like king queen off, fives, king five suited,
Mm,
maybe even queen five suited. I think both options are viable. We'll definitely mix here a little bit. And like you mentioned, against a small bet, also happy to continue with a call, because especially those loose random opponents tend to overbluff so much. Because ABC rack would never see bet like ace four on this board texture, right? Or
yeah,
like six
yeah,
seven. He's just check folding all the time, but those opponents just bet 80-90% of the time with a small sizing and they think they can get away with it. So even if you don't improve, you have a lot of fold equity on later streets. So when it goes check check on the turn, we just win the pot super often by betting river. So yeah, that's why I think also calling is definitely a valid option.
yeah. And I mean, I tend to be like fairly careful. Um, Say on like a double Broadway board when somebody, even if he's kind of loose, if he's betting into two players, I want to be like somewhat cautious. So I think if I was going to raise here, this hand, as you said, is fine, but I think I'd rather do it with something like Jack 10, a bit more robust equity, like Ace 10 maybe, something where it's like you have a little bit more equity because obviously here we're just drawing to the Jack, although the 10 and the 9 can definitely be live. So yeah, I think it's a spot where you can definitely mix, but I prefer leaning towards call more, which is what I do. And
Mm-hmm.
turn the 9, obviously checking over to him. There's no reason to donk out here. I mean, he can still have all the Jack 10s. I mean, we have all of them too. I think I'm probably defending Jack 10 off. Like it's close against a 4X, but I could see myself against two loose players if I think I have a decent edge. I could be defending Jack 10 off. So, and obviously I
Yeah, when
definitely
they're
have
not
Jack 10
that
suited.
experienced post flop, I'm
Yeah.
into. Yeah.
Yeah. It's like pretty much any Broadway is okay. And then, so yeah, I'd obviously checking it back over to him here. And he does check back, which is obviously good. I don't want to face a double barrel here. and then obviously a great river for us. So what do you think here? Do you want to go for a check again, try to trap, or just go for value right away?
Yeah, nice river, nice run out. We basically make the good old nuts on the river, because it's really hard to find a hand that helps you ever beat. We have to think, when we check, is he value betting a queen or a weak king? Probably not, right? Because he is also afraid that we have a better king, or maybe even some slow plays, hands like Jack 10, that we can definitely have in our flop calling range. So yeah, I would definitely bet river. We still have some bastard draws, right? Like ace jack off, ace 10 off. We can still have those hands and bluff from time to time on the river. So yeah, don't mind. Or I would definitely prefer betting big on the river against the weak king. Like, yeah, all the weaker kings like king 2 suited, king 3 suited, king 6, king 8, whatever. And definitely all the queen x hands that he's probably also betting way too often on the flop. So queen jack, queen 10, queen 8, queen 9 are probably not so often happening. I think most strong hands should bet the turn. Yeah, what do you think? Have you opted for check, for bet, small, big? What happened?
I mean, I decided to bet here, which I definitely like because I agree with your points. I think when he checks back turn too, he's just kind of like more showdown heavy.
Yeah.
So he could just even have hands like, I don't know, like pocket eight, stuff like that, and you never know in these games. Like he can get called for sure. So
Yeah, for sure.
I just don't want to give him the chance to check back. And as you say, he's got like so many queen X, and he can have weak king X, and yeah, I just think he's more showdown heavy. So I'd rather just be betting here.
And also, I think this is not the typical board texture that's nice to bluff. It's not that the river is a scare card, and it's really likely that a loose random opponent is turning like 7 high into a bluff. Even when he has like 6-7, he's probably just going to showdown or ace 4, right? He's not betting river, because your hand also looks quite showdown heavy, and people just under bluff in those situations. So I would definitely prefer value betting our hand than to check call or check raise against the standard sizing. So yeah, I really like betting big on the river for those reasons.
Yeah, so I bet I didn't bet too big. I guess about 2/3, and then he actually raises here. So I was pretty confused. Like I did not expect this at all, and
yeah,
I think it's actually a really tough decision. A really tough decision because my thinking was obviously his value range he's repping is like so narrow. It doesn't even make sense, to be honest. Like unless he has something like ace 9, because I figured if he has like a set, he should be betting the turn. If he has jack 10, why wouldn't he bet the turn? If he had like king queen and he's raising for value here, why wouldn't he bet the turn too? Like aces, those hands maybe kind of make sense, but I don't expect people to raise big with those hands on the river very often, especially on this run out. I would expect more of a call. So I was really confused, and I just figured his value range is so narrow, and I'm pretty high up in my range. Obviously, I have jack 10, which is better, but aside from that, I mean, I don't have really any other nines because I have jack 9 and 10-9 suited. So I thought I was pretty high up in my range. I block straights. I block if he has a hand like ace 9. That's another hand you could have, obviously, right? He's like a backdoored trip nines too. But obviously, the problem here is that we chop with all the other nines, and if he has ace 9, we're beat anyways. And I think when he uses a really big size in here too. So
yeah, it's really big. It's 5x. Yeah, 5x. That's a lot.
Yeah.
So I think when he raises small, there's a slight chance that he's bluffing. But still, it's such an awkward spot because we have to think about what usually happens on the river. And most of the time, river raises in live cash are fairly value heavy. People are not trying to get you off a good king or something like this, right? Because again, we are, or we still have a lot of strong hands. We have pocket fives, we have jack 10, so we have all the straights. And in those situations, people are not trying to get you off a king too often. And as mentioned before, we don't have too many bluffs besides ace jack and ace 10. That's basically about it. And especially when they raise so big, it's so hard to find a bluff. Like you mentioned, I don't think he ever has jack 10. I mean, we have a 10 in our hand, so it's less likely that he has jack 10. But also, when they make the straight on the turn, they're basically always betting it like 99.9% of the time.
Yeah.
He should continue with kings and queens and queen 9 and king 9 also the vast majority of the time, but you never know. Because the obvious draw got there, right? Jack 10 got there. So sometimes they are a little bit too cautious with their super strong hands, and they even check a setback from time to time. And yeah, finally on the river, they realize, oh, I have the nuts. Let's pile a ton of money in the pot. This is usually what happens. And this is also the problem in those situations, because the value range is insanely small, but by the same time, it's so hard to ever find a bluff in those situations.
Yeah, that's really well put. That's the exact predicament I'm in here, right? Is, again, he's repping like ridiculously narrow, but at the same time, is he ever bluffing here? Especially when he's like a random player. I think against regulars, I would give more credit. If they have a hand like, I don't know, like ace 10 or something, ace jack, like a hand where they have decent blockers, they might turn into a bluff. But I think random players, as you said, they just don't bluff raise river enough from my experience at all. And I think my blockers are actually kind of shitty because, as you say, if he has jack 10, he's going to bet the turn. So I'm actually blocking some of his potential bluffs, which I think would be like ace 10, ace jack, right? Those are like decent bluffs blocking the straight. So I think my blockers aren't even good. The only hand, as I say, I block is like ace 9, which, that's a couple combos. So yeah, I did end up making the call because I just couldn't, I was like, I can't believe this guy's value, but I kind of knew. I shouldn't say I knew. I mean, obviously I made the call for a reason, but obviously I suspected, like, yeah, people to show up with the nuts here somehow. But I still made the call anyways, just being kind of stubborn. And yeah, he shows up with the pocket queens, which is to be expected, And I think this is a spot where I think I definitely could have got away. Even though, again, we're high up in our range, it's just people just aren't. They're not, especially because I bet a decent size on the river. If I bet like tiny, sure, because then he figures maybe I'm repping kind of like maybe a queen or something, right? But when I bet like 70%, 60 to 70% pot, it's not like a big bet, but it's not a tiny bet either. So
yeah, I completely agree. When you bet like 20, 25 and he makes it 100, I'm in, always calling, right? Maybe he's even raising like ace king for value or king queen, who knows. But given your big sizing, it's definitely a substantial bet, as not that someone just raises randomly 60 big blinds on the river. So always think about if bluffs are possible. If you play against a weirdo, is he a maniac, right? Is he a good rack? And he tries to get you off some good hands as well. Because those points can definitely lead us into calling. But most of the time, I would say when you don't know your opponent, you just know he's kind of loose. And that's about it, or just a standard rack, I would opt most of the time for a fold, because this is definitely an underbluffed situation.
Yeah, for sure. Good points. Yeah, I think it's a good hand to learn from. And I think, again, when people kind of do weird shit, yeah, I don't know. It go two ways. I used to kind of think, oh, people do random weird shit. Their line doesn't make sense, so I call. But I'm kind of leaning more towards, like, especially when like regulars. Not saying this guy's a regular, but when they kind of do like funky lines, that don't necessarily make sense, but it's kind of a weird line you don't necessarily see a lot. I think a lot of times it's going to actually be value. You know what I mean? Because they're not. Most players aren't creative enough to like do these things with bluffs. So it's just like a weirdly played value hand that they kind of backed into, that they just think, oh, okay, now I'm on the river with the nuts. I'm going to make this raise, even though it doesn't really make sense. It is what it is. I think it's definitely value heavy more often than not. So you definitely would want to be watching out for that.
So yeah, I think we discussed all the points for calling and folding river. So definitely be a little bit cautious when your opponent takes a non-standard line. So yeah, I hope you enjoyed it. If you want to see more, hit the like button. So yeah, take care and see you soon.
See you guys later.